Welcome to Divine Earth Africa, where truth, history, and awakening meet. I bet you didn't know how deeply Africa bears the wounds of its colonial past. The lines drawn on maps, with no regard for existing communities or ethnic groups, continue to haunt the continent. These borders, arbitrarily imposed by European powers, slice through ancient kingdoms and tribal lands. They divided people with shared histories and cultures, creating a breeding ground for division and conflict. The legacy of these borders is a continent grappling with internal strife and instability. The arbitrary nature of these borders disregarded the intricate tapestry of cultures, languages, and ethnicities that existed within Africa. It forced communities that had coexisted for centuries into artificial nation-states, often with competing interests and historical grievances. This disregard for pre-existing social structures sowed the seeds of future conflicts, as different groups were pitted against each other in the competition for resources and power. The consequences of this forced unification and division are painfully evident in the numerous border disputes and ethnic conflicts that plague the continent. From the ongoing crisis in Sudan to the tensions in the Horn of Africa, the arbitrary borders continue to fuel instability and violence. The legacy of colonialism is not just a historical footnote, it is a living reality that continues to shape the lives of millions of Africans. Sudan, the Central African Republic, and the Democratic Republic of Congo stand as stark reminders of the devastating impact of colonial borders. These nations are engulfed in cycles of violence and instability, fueled by a complex interplay of ethnic tensions, resource competition, and political power struggles. In Sudan, the aftershocks of partition continue to reverberate. The creation of South Sudan did little to quell the violence. Ethnic cleansing, mass displacement, and brutal human rights violations have become tragically commonplace. The Central African Republic remains trapped in a spiral of conflict. Fighting between government forces and rebel groups, often divided along religious and ethnic lines, has created a humanitarian catastrophe. Millions are displaced, and the country teeters on the brink of collapse. The Democratic Republic of Congo, a country blessed with abundant natural resources, has become a tragic paradox. Its vast mineral wealth has fueled conflict and corruption, turning the country into a battleground for control. Armed groups, often backed by neighboring states, terrorize civilians and perpetuate a cycle of violence that seems to have no end. These are not isolated incidents, but rather symptoms of a deeper malaise, a toxic legacy of colonialism that continues to poison the present. The international community must recognize these crises not as isolated events but as interconnected struggles rooted in a shared history. Only then can we begin to address the root causes and work towards lasting peace. The Sahel region, stretching across Africa just south of the Sahara Desert, faces a multifaceted crisis. Climate change has exacerbated existing vulnerabilities, leading to prolonged droughts, desertification, and resource scarcity. This ecological crisis has, in turn, fueled social unrest, displacement, and conflict. Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, and Sierra Leone are grappling with the interconnected challenges of climate change, poverty, and weak governance. These factors have created fertile ground for extremist groups to exploit grievances and recruit disillusioned youth. The rise of militancy in the Sahel is a stark reminder that climate change is not merely an environmental issue. It is a threat multiplier that exacerbates existing conflicts and creates new ones. As resources become scarcer and competition intensifies, the potential for conflict increases. This is particularly true in regions like the Sahel, where livelihoods are closely tied to the land. The displacement of communities due to climate change further strains social cohesion and can lead to tensions between host communities and those who have been forced to flee their homes. Section 4. The Seeds of Discord, Tracing the Roots of Conflict to Colonial Rule. To understand the current crises in Africa, one must delve into the continent's colonial past. European powers, driven by greed and a sense of racial superiority, carved up Africa with no regard for existing social structures or ethnic boundaries. They imposed their own systems of governance, exploited Africa's resources, and sowed the seeds of division that continue to bear bitter fruit today. The colonial legacy is not merely a matter of history, it is a living reality. The arbitrary borders, the systems of governance that privilege certain groups over others, and the economic structures that perpetuate inequality are all products of colonialism. They continue to shape the political, economic, and social landscape of many African countries. Colonialism did more than just redraw borders, it fundamentally reshaped African societies. It introduced new systems of land ownership that often dispossessed indigenous populations. It created economies that were heavily reliant on the export of raw materials, leaving African nations vulnerable to fluctuations in global markets. And it sowed the seeds of ethnic conflict by pitting different groups against each other in the competition for limited resources and power. Section 5. A New Dawn. The Resurgence of African Voices and the Fight Against Neocolonialism. Despite the challenges, a new generation of Africans is rising. They are demanding accountability, challenging the status quo, and reclaiming their narrative. From Senegal to South Africa, young activists, artists, and entrepreneurs are driving a Pan-African renaissance. They are harnessing the power of technology to mobilize and organize, demanding an end to corruption, and calling for a more just and equitable society. This awakening of consciousness is not limited to the African continent. People across the globe are beginning to recognize the interconnectedness of their struggles. From the streets of Palestine to the mountains of Kashmir, people are rising up against oppression and demanding self-determination. The common thread that binds these movements is a rejection of the systems of oppression that have been imposed upon them and a yearning for freedom and justice. This is a fight against neocolonialism, a system where the chains of colonialism may be gone, but the scars remain. It's about reclaiming agency, demanding that Africa's resources benefit its people, and shaping a future free from the shackles of the past. This resurgence of African voices is not just about reclaiming the past, it is about shaping the future. It is about ensuring that the mistakes of the past are not repeated and that the next generation of Africans inherits a continent that is truly free and prosperous. Like, share, and subscribe to learn and bring awareness to the truth they never wanted us to know.